We're going to jump into a conversation that we've been having for the last 2 weeks. This is our third week of it. We've been in a conversation we've called The Rents around here. We've been talking about the temporary influence that we have in the life of the next generation. We only get it for a season, and we only get it once, but man, it leads to a permanent impact for them. And man, does it go quickly. I was reminded of this week randomly. It was the day before my daughter's 7th birthday. I was sitting on the couch watching baseball and doing the family budget. You know, I have to have the baseball to balance out the stress of the family budget. Worked out well. Okay, so I'm sitting on the couch and just kind of typing away, whatever, spreadsheeting away, doing my thing. And my wife randomly at 10:45 at night on the eve of my daughter's birthday thought that it would be a good idea to send me a video that her phone had made of a compilation of pictures of me and my daughter. And it's just me and my daughter in every picture. You know how your iPhone can make, it just randomly give you videos sometimes? Android users, I don't know, it probably does it too, just not quite as good. But you probably know what I'm talking about, you know? But so she sends me this video in this moment. It's like this 3-minute video. It's just me and my daughter. And I watched it, and I just was like a puddle. I mean, I texted her back. I was like, what are you thinking? She turns 7 tomorrow. Don't do this to me in this moment. But it was a reminder for me of just how quickly that time had gone by. I mean, she was turning 7, and 7 is 2 years from 9, and 9 is halfway to 18, you know? And I'm like, we're practically at graduation. It's just what it feels like in those moments. And you felt that too. And so we're taking time through this series just to talk about what it looks like as parents specifically to make the most of the time that we get with our kids. Now, I'll tell you that today's conversation is probably, for many of us, probably going to be the heaviest conversation that we have throughout this series. And if you've paid attention at all, I usually save the heaviest talk for the third week of a 4-week series. You know, we get 2 weeks to kind of warm you up, then we just kind of hit heavy on the third week, and then the fourth week just to patch things up. It's kind of how that works. So today, you just happen to show up on week 3 of this. So today's going to be a little bit heavier for some of us, I think. And parents, I'm going to tell you, as a parent, you're actually going to have an opportunity or an invitation in this conversation to do some things or make some decisions that you honestly probably at first might even be a little bit resistant to or hesitant to, or you might be open to it a little bit, but also be weighing the pros and cons throughout the entirety of it. But my belief is that actually, as we get to the end of our conversation today, you could actually be in a position to make some decisions that could change the direction of your family forever. And if you're not a parent in the room, I know this. I know you care about the next generation as well, and you care about the people in your life who are parents. And so by the end of our conversation, I'm going to give you a way that you can actually support parents in this as well. Now, as we jump into it this morning, I want to ask you a question. It's really a simple question. It's a kind of dumb question. It's just this. Have you ever tried to carry too much at one time? You ever try, maybe you're walking out of Aldi and you're like, oh, I don't need a cart. I can squeeze one more thing in that cottage cheese box. You know what I'm talking, some of you know what I'm talking about. You're just making it work. Have you ever walked out of Walmart and just found yourself just like, I could probably do it, and then all of a sudden the bag rips in the parking lot? Have you ever been carrying a load of diapers and had them split in the parking lot? Just me. Okay, cool. Yeah, have you ever tried to carry too much at one time? There was a season of life for me a few years ago. We were actually living in Ohio, and our family was a part of planting a church, brand new church in Ohio. And our church needed a building. We needed a place to meet. And so we found actually this restaurant that had closed down that we had the chance to lease and meet in. And it was this old Italian restaurant that had been built, it started to be built in the 40s, and then every 20 years they had added on just another section. It's just this old, kind of fallen down Italian restaurant. And we get in there and you kind of walk through, and it's just a restaurant, but it had so much space that we could use for a church because of the things that they'd continued to add on there. And so we walked in and we were renting the space. We got it for cheap, but we realized that we needed to pretty much renovate everything. I mean, every lighting fixture needed to come down, every wall needed to be painted, every floor needed to be cleaned or replaced. I mean, everything just needed to be renovated. And you know, like a church, we just thought we could probably do this all ourselves, you know? That just seems like a great idea in this moment. And so we did. And somehow along the way, I was responsible for paint. I don't know why they chose me to be responsible for paint. I'd never painted a room in my life, but I was responsible for paint. And we went through probably 100 or more gallons of paint through that season, just constantly going back and forth to Sherwin-Williams, filling up on paint slapping it on the walls, fill up some more paint, slap it on the walls. And we were near the end of the project. I mean, we were like a week away from opening the church. And we were almost at the end, and we were like we just need like a little bit more paint. We'd almost gotten there, but we just had a little bit left to do, and we ran out just a little bit too early. And so I'll go to Sherwin-Williams, and I got about 8 gallons of paint, and I put them in my trunk, and I came to the church. Now, we're in a hurry at this point. We're just trying to get things ready to open this building. And so I popped my trunk, and the box, the way they kind of done it is like there were 4 cans that fit in the box, and then 4 cans that just sat on top of the box. And I was like, you know what? I think I could probably handle this, you know? And so I went, and I literally just like, I'm not even going to try right now, but I just picked up all the paint, you know, all 8 gallons, and I walked into the door. And quite honestly, I navigated the parking lot pretty well. I mean, it was flat, so that was nice. And then I got to the door, and the door opened up to like a vestibule, you know, like you kind of go through one glass door, then there's like 4 feet, and then there's another glass door. And so I'm like, okay, I just got to get through 2 doors. I can handle this. And so I'm holding this big box of 8 gallons of paint, and I grab the door, and I swing it open, and I walk in, and I just barely kind of get myself in there. And as I'm moving to get through the crack of the door just in time, 3 of the cans just drop. And when they drop, they didn't just drop. They hit like with the perfect angle where the lid just pops right off, and paint in this little vestibule just splattered everywhere. I mean, it looked like somebody played paintball in there for an hour. I mean, it was just like on the marble walls of this, you know, formerly nice Italian restaurant, all along the floor, like the carpet that we now had to replace, but we weren't planning on replacing. You know what I mean? Like paint just went absolutely everywhere, all because I just tried my best to carry too much, and I thought I could do 1 more gallon and 1 more gallon and 1 more gallon in that moment. And you've had, I mean, moments like that, moments in life where you found yourself carrying too much, and eventually something dropped. Now, we'll talk about this specifically as parents, right? Like, you're not carrying on paint cans as parents throughout the week, but there's a number of things, a number of buckets that you as a parent find yourself responsible for and carrying the weight of throughout your week, right? Let's just talk about a few of these for a second. Many of us, you go throughout the week and you carry the weight of your kids' education, right? Like, you're just trying to get them to school. You're just trying to get them through class. You're just trying to get them to like get through passing for some of you, or some of you, you feel the weight of them actually like using their academic gifts and getting to a place in life where that could actually benefit them. Like, you're worried about their grades for college. You're worried about what might come for them on the other side of high school. You're worried about their test scores on the ACT. Around here, we take the ACT in Minnesota, right? That's our thing, not SAT. Yeah, great. So you're worried about the ACT, right? Like, you feel the weight of your kids' education. You carry that every day. Some of us, on top of that, you know, you don't want them just to get an education. You'd like them to get a job one day, you know? Like, you'd like them to make some money. So you feel the weight of their career, and you just carry the weight of, like, what are they going to do when they grow up? And the older your kid gets, the more they get asked that question, and the more they get asked that question, the more that question actually feels like a real question that deserves an answer. What are you going to do when you grow up? Some of us, you also, on top of these things, carry the weight of athletics, right? Like, you've put your kids in sports because you want them to learn great things that come with sports. You want them to learn work ethic and leadership and discipline and time management. And so you've put them into those things. But honestly, it creates another thing for you to carry throughout the week, partly carrying them from one practice to the next practice. You know, you carry the weight of that. Others of us, you carry the weight, let's see, what do we got? Of arts, right? Like, you actually put your kids in some kind of a fine arts program, be it band, orchestra, chorus, what have you. And that's one more thing for you to carry them throughout the week, right? Others of us, on top of that, you don't want them just to do some of these things. You'd actually like them to have friends as well. You know, like, that kind of seems like a good thing. And you want them to know how to make friends on top of that. And so you feel the weight of making sure that they get to enough of the things that they're invited to the parties, to the birthdays, to the hangouts, whatever it may be. You just want them to be able to experience a positive social life. And on top of all of this, for many of us in the room, and not all of us, but for many of us in the room, you also carry the bucket of faith for your family as well. Like, your hope for your kids is that at the end of their 18 years with you, that they would actually own their faith and their personal relationship with Jesus. And that they would carry that themselves into adulthood. Now, when we look at the number of things that we carry as parents throughout the week, and the number of things that you carry day to day, quite honestly, for many of us, and not all of us, but for many of us, this all sets you up to play a game that I've kind of made a term for, right? It's a game that I call strategic disappointment, okay? Because quite honestly, you could not satisfy all of these demands in any given week. And many of you feel the responsibility to choose day to day, week to week, who it is that you're going to strategically and intentionally disappoint. Is it going to be the friend who invited your kid to something at the same time that practice was happening, and you're going to disappoint that friend of your kid by not letting your kid be a part of that? Or are you going to disappoint a coach whose practice overlaps with something else going on in your life? Or is there a teacher that's going to be disappointed because your kid's work isn't in on time or isn't in to the level and up to the par that they would hope for your kid to turn it in at? You find yourself with all these things, having to constantly choose, who am I going to disappoint today? Who are we going to deprioritize today? Who are we going to undervalue today because of all the things that we find ourselves carrying? And there's a question that you use and the question that you ask in moments like this and seasons like this. And the question that we've all kind of learned to come and ask, and it's actually a relatively new question. The question that many of us ask from on a week-to-week basis is, hey, what are our top priorities right now? What are the things of all the things that we're going to choose to value the most in this season, that we're going to choose to value the most right now? If we have to disappoint some things, we'll disappoint some things, but what are the things that we're going to choose to not disappoint right now? Now, I'll tell you, this is a relatively new question because this word priorities is actually, believe it or not, a relatively new word. In fact, the word priority was first used in the 1400s, right? The first time this word was ever used in the 1400s, the word priority, you begin to see it in history. But when it began in the 1400s, it was only ever used in the singular sense. Because why? Because you can only ever have one true priority. And for 500 years, that was the case. Until the 1900s came along. And in the 1900s, for the first time, we began to use the word priority in plural form as priorities. Now, how did that happen? Well, think about all of the things that came with the 1900s just for a minute, okay? We got cars, which allowed us to move from one place to another place faster. We got electricity, which allowed us to live our day longer. We got the internet, which opened us up to a host of pieces of information, right? We got all-you-can-eat buffets. You may remember those? Those kind of are a dying breed at this point, right? All-you-can-eat buffets, right? You'd have anything you want, as much as you want, whenever you want. At the end, as a kid, it's my favorite part. At the end was that big silver Thermo King soft-serve ice cream machine. Anybody remember that? You know what I mean? Just fill up your plate with more ice cream than you could eat before it melts, you know? We had all kinds of things that the 1900s brought us. And if the 1900s brought us anything, it brought us options. And for the first time, we began to use the word priorities. And I would just suggest this to you, that in a world full of options, we actually lost our ability to choose. We actually lost our ability to pick one thing over another thing. And so we just tried to pick up everything at once, right? The irony of this is that all of these things promise to make our lives better, and they promise to make our kids better. They promise to teach our kids work ethic. They promise to teach our kids leadership. They promise to teach our kids character. They promise to make us better. But many of us trying to carry all of these things, you don't feel better as a parent. You're actually left feeling worse. I mean, for many of us, you're actually left feeling exhausted. You're tired. You're running from practice to rehearsal to school to homework, straight to bed. You're doing everything you can just to keep the trains moving on time. You're exhausted and wiped out from that. Many of us, you find yourself constantly feeling disappointed, right? Disappointed in yourself and the fact that you can't do all of it. You find yourself dropping balls at home or dropping balls at work, unable to keep up with all of it, right? In the midst of that, many of us, you find yourself just feeling ultimately like a failure, right? Like you feel like you're at least failing someone all of the time. And it may not be the same one all of the time, but you're failing someone some of the time, you know? And you find yourself in the same position that every parent finds themselves in eventually. Not able to pick it up, not able to carry it all. Now, the reality is, this isn't just you either. I mean, I'm willing to bet that for many of us, not all, but for many of us, your kids feel this way too. I mean, even just this week, we found ourselves as parents wondering why our kid was acting a certain way throughout the week or throughout the day, and then getting to the end of the day, putting her to bed, and she fell asleep like that. And we realized immediately, man, she's wiped out. She's exhausted. Some of you find your kids acting certain ways, and you recognize, man, they're just exhausted right now. And they feel the weight of trying to keep up with everything too. They know that there are balls that they drop in their life as well, people that they're disappointing on top of it all as well. And the reality is the system has set you up in many ways to fail. The culture that you live in, a world full of options, has actually created a situation that sets you up to feel this way. And so let me ask you a question this morning. It's kind of our driving question for the morning. Would your life be simpler with a single priority? Would your world as a parent be easier to manage if there was only one thing that you were ultimately committed to winning at? And if that thing was actually the best thing for your kid, could you actually rest in that a little bit? Is it possible that your life would be simpler with a single priority? I think it would be. We're going to discover that together this morning. Now, the reality is we're not the first culture to feel like we're easily distracted and easily pulled away and pulled aside by a number of things. In fact, thousands of years ago, there's a group of people, the same group of people that we talked about last Sunday, the Hebrew people, who found themselves in a similar situation. Just to catch you up if you weren't here last week, the Hebrew people were a group of people who were slaves in Egypt for many years and then ultimately escaped Egypt. They spent 40 years in the wilderness. That's where we left them last week. And after 40 years in the wilderness, they were led by a leader named Joshua into a new land, a land that they had been told that God had promised for them, a land that would be full of everything that they needed to survive and to thrive. Now, Joshua establishes them in this new land. And in this new land, they brought a number of things. I mean, they brought obviously everything they needed. They brought their supplies. They brought their families. But they brought with them something else as well. They brought with them what we would kind of call household idols. Now, this isn't something that you and I are super familiar with because you probably don't have an idol on your shelf at home. You know what I mean? But these were household idols that families would actually take with them from one place to the next and pass down from one generation to the next. And idols that they would serve and idols that they would look to for hope and provision in certain times and certain seasons. Now, these weren't the same as the God that they had been serving all along. I mean, they believed ultimately in God, but they were still polytheistic in many ways. As they believed that their God was the best God, but they had also held on to these household family gods that had been passed down from one generation to the next generation, and they continued to look to them and rely on them as well. Now, quite honestly, they really didn't make these gods out of gold, and this is really just a spray-painted vase, so like you couldn't tell that already, you know. But they actually would have fashioned these out of things like wood or things like clay. They actually had these small things that could sit them on their shelf and look to them for hope when they needed them. Okay. And Joshua knew, coming into this land, that if the people didn't put their focus solely on God alone, if they allowed themselves to be distracted, it would eventually come at their demise and their undoing. And so near the end of Joshua's life, Joshua called together the Hebrew people. He pulls them together for one big farewell speech, one big, hey, let me make sure I instill in you all of the things that you're going to need to live and continue beyond my lifetime. The author of the book of Joshua tells us that Joshua summoned all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, including their elders, their leaders, their judges, their officers. So he made sure everybody with influence, everybody with any level of power was there as well. Made sure that they were there on the front row, ready to hear, ready to listen. It says that they came and presented themselves to God. And if we had time, we could lean in to the book of Joshua and all of the things that he says to them in this moment. He begins by reminding them of God's faithfulness to them and their families over and over again, the ways that he brought them out of slavery in Egypt, the ways that he provided for them, the ways that he defeated their enemies, the ways that he had given them this land now that they were in with towns and with crops that they hadn't even planted but now get the benefit of receiving from. And then in this moment, after reminding them everything that God has done for them, he challenges their commitment to God. He looks at them and he says this, he says, so fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. It's the same word that Moses used in our conversation last week. He says, serve this God with the fullness of your heart and with sincerity. And he said, like, in other words, other gods in other cultures nearby wanted most from their people their sacrifices. For Joshua, he says, no, this God, what he wants most from you is actually your heart. Right? He goes on, he begins to show them what this looks like for them. He says, put away forever the idols, those household gods that your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Put them away forever. Be done with them forever. Don't be distracted by them anymore. He says, serve the Lord alone. Now, pause for just a second. Honestly, this is one of those moments where a lot of this feels foreign to us in 21st century America. Because you don't have idols sitting on your shelf. You don't have little household gods that you go home and serve, right? But the reality is, in our culture, we idolize all kinds of things, don't we? We find ourselves serving all kinds of things, don't we? Find ourselves putting hope and trust and reliance on all kinds of things, don't we? I mean, many of us, and I find myself tempted as a parent, right? We put our trust and our hope in our kids' education. Like, I just want my kid to be smart. Like, honestly, and I say this honestly, as a kid growing up, I wasn't great at a lot of things, but I was good at school. And the opportunities that I got in life seemed to be, if I were to take a lot of the other things out of the equation, a lot of the opportunities I got in life seemed to be because of how I did in school. And so as a parent, I want that for my kid. And it's easy for me to put my hope in that. For some of us, we put our hope in our kids' athletics, right? Like, you just want your kid to be great at sports because you were great at sports and the opportunities that afforded you, or because you weren't great at sports and you felt like that cost you some opportunities. Some of us, you put your hope in just who your kids' friends are. You're like, if I could just get my kid around the right people, everything else be okay. There's so many different things that we find ourselves putting our hope and our trust in. So many things that we find ourselves serving. Now, Joshua understood their tendency in the same way I think he would understand our tendency. So Joshua went on to talk to the Hebrew people. He said, but if you refuse to serve the Lord, then at least choose today whom you will serve. In other words, there's no ambiguity. There's no ambivalence in this. There's no serving God and also serving other things. It's serving God or serving other things. So if it's not God, it's most certainly someone or something else. And then he gives them options, actually. It's kind of fun. Actually, just gives them some choices to make. He does it by asking them some questions. They're kind of rhetorical questions, but they're kind of not, because they're the kind of questions that kind of deserve an answer. He looks at them and he says, hey, just be honest. He goes, would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates? The same gods that your families have served year after year after year. Do you want to keep doing things the way your family has always done them, generation after generation after generation? Do you want to hold on to the things that have defined your family over and over and over again? I mean, every family is defined by something, right? I mean, some of us, your family is defined by a sport that you all play, or at least the fact that you all play sports. You say, we're an athletic family, or we're a hockey family, or we're a soccer family, or we're a basketball family. Like, that's just the thing that defines us. Because you played it, your parents played it, your parents' parents played it, right? And it's just been a definition for you, right? For some of us, they're just natural things that your family has done over and over and over again. And Joshua says, hey, that's a natural pull for you. It's natural to make that a priority for you, but it pulls you potentially from something else as well. And does it pull you from what's best for you? He goes on, he asks them a second question. He goes, or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live? Joshua acknowledges, hey, you've moved into a new place and you've moved into a new culture, and you're now surrounded by a group of people who think differently than you and act differently than you. And their priorities are different in the ways that you've been called to live. And he says to them, hey, you're going to be tempted to pull away. You're going to be tempted and drawn by the things that they prefer. You're going to be tempted to put your hope and trust in the things that they put their hope and trust in. And that's natural. But Joshua understood It was a better priority and a higher priority than the ones that their culture would surround them with. And so he looks back at them after asking them these questions, and he gives them his answer to the questions. He says, "But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord." Now, notice what Joshua didn't do. Okay? Joshua didn't take a poll first. Joshua didn't look for consensus and kind of see what the general mood is. Joshua didn't text all the other parents and ask them what they're going to do. Joshua just said, "Hey, I'm going to step out in this moment, and I'm going to make a decision for me, and I'm going to make a decision for my family." And quite honestly, it may not make sense to some of you, and you might think I'm crazy in the midst of it. But Joshua understood that there's no better priority than a higher authority. And if a higher authority exists for Joshua, he believed that it did, then there's no better decision that he can make than to orient and align his family around it. Now, the people look back at Joshua and they say the right things in this moment. In fact, the author tells us that the people replied, "We would never abandon the Lord and serve other gods." We can't even imagine doing that, Joshua. No, we get it. Like, there's no way that we would do that. But Joshua doesn't just accept this answer. Joshua knew that talk is cheap. Joshua knew that anyone can say, "Hey, yeah, God's the most important thing in my life. God and country," you know? Joshua knew it's easy to make a social media bio say, "Jesus follower first, husband to Emily second, dad to Addie third." You know what I mean? Joshua knew. Even country music artists can talk about God and how important he is. Joshua knew that talk is cheap. And so Joshua actually calls them to an action in this moment, an action that would force them to put their attention on where their real priorities were. Joshua says, "All right then, destroy the idols among you and turn your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel." Now, I can just imagine everyone in this moment being like, "Whoa, wait, hold on a second. This has been in my family for years. We carried this with us from Egypt. We carried this with us here. This thing's come with us everywhere we went. What do you mean destroy it? We've always done things this way. We've always found a way to make both work. And after all, if we need it later, it might not be there for us." But Joshua says, no. For Joshua, there's no partial obedience in this. For Joshua, there's no this and that. For Joshua, there's no hold them both simultaneously in different hands. For Joshua, he understood that abandonment was necessary, and Joshua understood a principle that honestly we probably need to understand this morning. It's that your priority is displayed through your decisions, not your words. Now, you already know this because, quite honestly, we're great at saying the right things. I mean, if there's anything that Americans do well, we say the right things real well, don't we? We know all the right things to say. We know how to talk about our health and how important our health is, and turn around and just grab McDonald's when the day's getting late. You know what I mean? We know how to talk about how important our sleep is, and then binge one more Netflix episode. You know what I mean? Like, we know how to say all the right things. Your priority isn't determined by the things that you say. Your priority is determined by the decisions that you make. And so let me ask you a question this morning, especially parents. What do your decisions say about your family's priority? When you look at the track record of decisions that you've made, when you've been forced to choose, when you can't satisfy everything and you have to make a decision, what have you chosen to satisfy? I'm going to ask it this way. What does your calendar say about your family's priority? When you look at your time and where it goes, if we're to pull up your Google Calendar or your Zboard or whatever it is that you use to manage the chaos known as your family schedule, what would it say about what's most important to you? Or maybe let's ask this one. This one's a little bit more personal. Honestly, you're the only person who could know the answer to this question. What does your spending say about your family's priority? If you were to look at the way that you use resources, what you spend it on, what you give, all of those things, what would it say about what's most important to you? Because your priorities aren't determined by your words. They show up in your decisions. Now, I'm going to talk specifically for the last few minutes here to parents in the room, those of us who find ourselves carrying the weight, honestly, of the expectations that come with raising kids today, and also the weight that comes with wanting to raise a family of faith. Right? I know for many of us, your greatest desire for your kid is that they would actually graduate high school, eventually leave your home, and own their personal relationship with Jesus. So I want to talk specifically to those of us who feel that way and share some thoughts on that. The first one is this, that you can't actually prioritize your family's faith without deprioritizing everything else, and that's the hardest part of all of this, quite honestly. Choosing to prioritize something is easy. Choosing to deprioritize some things is really, really hard because we don't like saying no to things. And we don't like disappointing people, including our kids. But you can't prioritize one thing without deprioritizing everything else. And many of us feel the pressure of everything else as we try to make our family's faith the priority. Now, I'll tell you, I am not an expert at this, okay? I've been raising a child for 7 years. I have this much experience. I'm not going to try to pretend like I've got this all figured out, because I don't. And quite honestly, I haven't had the time to have to figure it out for myself as a parent. But I did grow up in a house with parents who I will say, looking back, and I didn't even realize it in the moment, but looking back, did this exceedingly well. And so I spent some time just processing through what I watched them do and how I saw them operate. And I want to share with you 3 things that I saw them do really well to deprioritize everything else without shutting down everything else in order to keep our faith a priority. The first one was this. I watched my parents do this really well. They determined the non-negotiables for our family's faith. They determined the non-negotiables. All right, everyone else in my life seemed to be serving other things and having other priorities. All my friends at school, people even that we went to church with, seemed to be operating with certain priorities, but my parents very early set non-negotiables that they weren't willing to budge on for the sake of our family's faith. And they said, hey, we're just not going to pivot or shift on these. Or in very rare situations, only in very rare situations, are we going to pivot and shift on these things. And so here's what I want to do. In just a second, I want to show you kind of what those non-negotiables were for us growing up as a family. Now, before I put these up, I want to tell you this. These are not my recommendation to you. These are what worked well for our family and what my parents decided were going to be the non-negotiables for us. You're going to have a completely different list for your family. You should probably have a different list for your family because you need to lead your family in whatever season your family is in right now. But I want to share just as an example what the list of non-negotiables were for us growing up. They were this. Morning devotions. I don't know how they did this, but every morning before school, we sat down, we read scripture together as a family, and we prayed together as a family. I, as a parent right now, look at my morning routine, and I go, we need more of this in my family, in my household. I'm telling you, I'm not the expert on this. I haven't even got this first one figured out in my house, okay? But growing up as a kid, even as teenagers, when things were hectic, even as our start times for school got earlier and earlier, this was priority. And somehow they got both of us kids who were almost the same age sitting on the couch for this. I don't know how they did it. Sometimes my dad would read the same chapter from the Bible 3 days in a row because he knew we weren't paying attention the first day or the second day. And about halfway through, we'd realize, wait a minute, you know what I mean? Like, what? This is starting to get familiar, you know? They didn't care if we listen. I mean, they cared if we listened or not, but regardless of whether we were listening or not, they were going to keep this consistent in our family. Second was family dinners in the evenings. I barely remember missing family dinners as a family. And that's not possible for every family, but it was possible for our family. We were in a situation where schedules were flexible. We did not eat dinner at the same time every day, but by and large, we ate dinner together every day, and it gave us a chance to process what God was doing in our lives and the ways that we had experienced maybe God that day or just what was going on at school or at work, and gave them the chance to speak into what was going on in our lives from a faith perspective. The third one was Sunday church, and this one was just it for us. I mean, it was just a thing that we just said, my parents said. I didn't even get to choose. I resented it at times. But my parents just said, hey, this is something that's going to be important, and we're going to build our lives around it. And the last one was, at that point, Wednesday night church. That's not a thing as much anymore. Right? It kind of filled the role of like small groups, or what we call dinner parties here at the Co. But my parents just said, hey, our kids are going to be in youth on Wednesday night because we want them around other kids who share their values, and we're going to be around other parents who share our values, and we're just going to protect that space. We're going to protect that space. We're going to do whatever we have to protect that space. Now, you probably look at this list and go, okay, did y'all do anything other than read your Bible and go to church growing up? You know what I mean? And honestly, we did. In elementary and middle school, I played baseball. My sister played softball every summer. We both played basketball every winter. In middle school and high school, she kept playing soccer, and she started doing some band things. I got involved in band, and then I started doing, playing in the drum line and kind of doing the marching band thing. And every school has a different program. Our program was pretty intense with it. We would show up and practice almost 5 days a week, if not 5 days a week, after school for marching band and for drumline. We did winter drumline as well, so we did that all through. It was pretty much if school's in session, I was hitting a drum. You know what I mean? So just about every day after school, we had practice for that. Every Saturday, we had all-day practice for that. And then we were traveling nationally for competitions. We would go 3-4 states away on the weekends for competitions. It's just what we did. And yet, these continued to be non-negotiables for our family. I remember one time I had a band instructor who scheduled a rehearsal for a time that we had one of these things. It was like a one-off, not normal kind of a thing. And so I had to go to him as the student, as the kid, and tell him that I wasn't going to be able to be there for that rehearsal. It was my mom didn't call for me. It was my responsibility. That was my activity, my thing. It was my responsibility to go and talk to him and explain to him why I wasn't going to be able to be there for that rehearsal. Now, was he completely understanding and totally got it? I was like, man, I'm glad you got this faith thing going on. That's awesome. No, not at all. He was disappointed and frustrated. I was, just for context, I was what they call center snare, which doesn't mean much to anybody, but if you've ever seen drumline, I don't know if Nick Cannon's not a good analogy. You know what I mean? But I was the guy who was the middle guy who was responsible. I had to set the tempo for the whole band, whatever. They kind of relied on me every time that they rehearsed. He was pretty upset that I wasn't going to be there. But I knew. It wasn't a hard conversation in our house because I just knew how we did things as a family, and it was my responsibility to have that conversation. So first thing, I would just encourage you, what are your family's non-negotiables if you're a family of faith? What are the things as a family? You go, hey, we're going to protect these things. We're putting boundaries around things. We're going to do these things at least at a certain frequency or a certain minimum. And with very rare exception, we're never going to budge on these things. What are those things for your family? Second thing, once you have those established, I would say this, say yes with limits. Say yes with limits. You ever said yes to something only to find out later that what you said yes to was way greater than what you thought you were saying yes to? Say yes with limits. Know what your limits are right out of the gate. And when you say yes to opportunities for your family or for your kids, say yes over and over and over again. But just establish those limits from the very start. And just know that if things encroach upon those limits, you've already decided what's going to win in those moments. I remember growing up, one of the things that we said yes to as a family was sports, especially when I was younger. We'd say yes to sports, and I would play different sports, what have you. And I remember we moved one time, and we moved into a different community that had a different baseball league and had a different schedule for that baseball league. And that baseball league played games on Wednesday nights. My family had already decided that a non-negotiable for us was to be involved in the community of our church on Wednesday nights. And so as a kid growing up, I would go to the ball field, and they would talk to the coach every time. I was younger, so they would talk to the coach for me. Say, hey, he's going to have to leave around 6:30 or whatever the time was. And so I would play 4 innings of baseball, and then I would leave, and I would miss the rest of the game, and I'd have to find out at practice the next day how the rest of the game went, because my parents had said yes to that, but they'd said yes with limits because they were still protecting what was most important to them for the sake of our family. Now, last one is this. And this one I think is honestly probably one of the most important ones. In fact, if you prioritize the first two, you'll discover this. But you also kind of need this to be able to prioritize the other two consistently and sustainably. The third one's this: stay connected to a community that shares your priority. Listen, if you only surround yourself with people who don't have boundaries in their life, who say yes to everything unabashedly, who don't have any non-negotiables and haven't prioritized faith in their life, you're going to feel like the crazy one. You're going to feel like the exception, and you will be the exception. And you need to surround yourself with other people who are making similar decisions from similar values and from similar perspectives to remind you that you're not the only one living this way, and quite honestly, to give your kids examples of other families who are also living this way so that they know that you're not the only ones living this way. One of the best things that you could do for your family is to surround yourself with other families who are also living and thinking this way. Now, I'll tell you this too. If you don't have kids at home, one of the best things that you can do, I talked to you about this last week, one of the best things that you could do if you don't have kids at home is to actually serve in kids within our community here at the Co. Because when you do that, you're actually creating a space for families to come and connect with other families that share their same values and be reminded that there is a greater priority that they put themselves in service to. That there is a greater priority that they've aligned their lives around. Now, as we wrap up, let me ask you the same question I asked you at the beginning of our time together. Would your life be simpler with a single priority? No. Notice I didn't ask, would your life be easier with a single priority? Because quite honestly, it may not be. In some ways, this is actually harder. Drawing boundaries is harder. Saying no is harder. But I believe, and I think deep down you believe, it's actually better. It's better for you. It's better for your family. It's better for the faith of your kids. Let me pray for you before we go. God, I thank you for the ways that you continue to show us wisdom over thousands of years and through timeless cultures. It's perspectives that remind us of what's most important in our lives. God, I pray that today would be the kind of day where some of us find ourselves making decisions that we never thought we'd make, establishing priorities that we never thought we could actually hold to. God, for the family or the parent who finds himself exhausted and tired from running around endlessly, trying to keep all the balls in the air, trying to manage all of it. God, would you settle their heart this morning? Would you help them to experience the kind of peace that only comes from following you and following in your ways? And would you help them to take a step to lead their family in your ways? God, for the parent who worries about the faith of their kid, God, would you help us to remember that you are constantly pursuing our kids just as much more than we are? As much as we love them, you love them even more. Do you remind us that your ways were created for their benefit? God, would you help us to be the kind of parents who lead them in your ways? God, we love you. We thank you. We trust you with our families, even when trusting you leads us to decisions that bring fear as well. Thank you for this. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.